The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows as William Thompson poured his second cup of coffee. His hands trembled slightly, not from the caffeine, but from the weight of what the past few weeks had brought into his life. Kate, his wife of 15 years, sat at the kitchen table, her usually vibrant face now pale and drawn. She picked at her toast, taking small bites that she barely seemed to taste. "You should eat more," William said gently, settling into the chair across from her. His voice carried the careful tone he had been using lately, as if speaking too loudly might shatter something precious between them. Kate looked up and managed a weak smile. "I'm trying, Will. Everything just tastes so strange lately." She pushed the plate away and reached for her water glass with shaking hands. William noticed how thin her fingers had become, how the wedding ring that once fit perfectly now slid loosely around her finger. The changes had started small. Kate had always been the energetic one in their relationship, the woman who could clean the entire house, tend her garden, and still have energy to dance in the kitchen while cooking dinner. She was the one who dragged William out for weekend hikes, who planned spontaneous road trips, who filled their home with laughter and music. But over the past month, she had grown increasingly tired, complaining of headaches that wouldn't go away and a weakness that seemed to settle deep in her bones. "Maybe we should call Dr. Martinez again," William suggested, trying to keep his voice steady. They had already been to see their family doctor twice, and each time they were told it was probably stress, maybe a virus that was taking its time to clear up. But William's instincts told him something deeper was wrong. Kate nodded slowly. "I think you're right. This isn't going away on its own." She stood up from the table, but as she did, her legs seemed to give out beneath her. William lunged forward, catching her before she could fall, his heart racing as he felt how light she had become in his arms. "Kate, are you okay?" The panic in his voice was unmistakable now. She steadied herself against him, breathing hard. "I'm fine, just got up too fast." But they both knew it was more than that. This was the third time this week she had nearly collapsed, and each incident seemed worse than the last. William helped her back to her chair, his mind racing. He pulled out his phone and dialed Dr. Martinez's office, his fingers fumbling slightly as he pressed the numbers. When the receptionist answered, he could hear the desperation creeping into his own voice. "This is William Thompson. My wife, Kate, needs to be seen today. Something is very wrong, and we can't wait for a regular appointment." The receptionist, Maria, had known Kate and William for years. She heard the fear in his voice and immediately understood the gravity of the situation. "Bring her in at 2 o'clock, Mr. Thompson. Dr. Martinez will see her right away." The hours until the appointment stretched endlessly. William tried to work from his home office, but found himself constantly checking on Kate, who had fallen asleep on the living room couch. She looked so small curled up there, wrapped in the blue throw blanket they had bought on their honeymoon in Ireland. Her breathing was shallow, and occasionally she would make small sounds of discomfort in her sleep. William remembered their honeymoon, how Kate had insisted on climbing the cliffs of Maher despite the rain and wind. She had stood at the edge, her red hair whipping around her face, laughing with pure joy at the wildness of it all. "Isn't this incredible, Will?" she had shouted over the wind. "I feel so alive." Now, watching her struggle just to stay awake, that memory felt like it belonged to different people entirely. At 1:30, William gently woke Kate up. "Time to go, sweetheart." She opened her eyes slowly, looking confused for a moment before focusing on his face. "The appointment?" "Yes. Dr. Martinez is going to see us at 2. Getting Kate ready took longer than usual. She moved slowly, pausing to rest between putting on her shoes and brushing her hair. William helped her with her coat, noticing how it seemed to swallow her diminished frame. As they walked to the car, Kate leaned heavily on his arm, and William found himself practically carrying her weight. The drive to Dr. Martinez's office was silent, except for the soft radio music William had turned on to fill the uncomfortable quiet. He glanced over at Kate frequently, watching her stare out the passenger window with an expression he couldn't quite read. Was it fear? Resignation? He reached over and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Whatever this is, we'll get through it together," he said, his voice stronger than he felt. Kate squeezed back weakly. "I know. I love you, Will. I love you too." Dr. Martinez's waiting room was nearly empty when they arrived. William signed Kate in while she sank into one of the cushioned chairs, closing her eyes and leaning her head back against the wall. The receptionist gave William a concerned look, and he knew that Kate's appearance was alarming even to someone who saw sick people every day. Within 10 minutes, they were called back. Dr. Martinez, a kind woman in her 50s who had been treating their family for over a decade, took one look at Kate and immediately shifted into a more serious mode than William had ever seen from her. "Kate, tell me exactly what you've been experiencing," Dr. Martinez said, her voice gentle but focused as she began her examination. Kate described the exhaustion that seemed to go beyond normal tiredness, the headaches that came in waves and sometimes brought nausea with them, the weakness in her legs, and the way food she had always loved now made her feel sick. As she spoke, Dr. Martinez listened carefully, occasionally asking follow-up questions while checking Kate's vital signs and looking into her eyes with a small flashlight. William watched the doctor's expression carefully, searching for any clues about what might be wrong. He saw concern, but also something else, a kind of professional worry that made his stomach clench with anxiety. "Kate, I want to run some blood tests today," Dr. Martinez said finally. "But I'm also going to refer you to a specialist. Dr. Harrison at City General Hospital is excellent, and I think you should see her as soon as possible." "What kind of specialist?" William asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "Dr. Harrison is an oncologist," Dr. Martinez said quietly. "I want to rule out some possibilities, but Kate's symptoms are concerning enough that I think we need to move quickly with testing." The word oncologist hit William like a physical blow. Cancer. She was talking about cancer. He felt the room spin slightly and gripped the arms of his chair to steady himself. Next to him, Kate had gone very still, her face pale, but strangely calm. "How quickly?" Kate asked, her voice steady in a way that amazed William. "I'm going to call Dr. Harrison's office right now and see if they can fit you in tomorrow or the next day. In the meantime, we'll do blood work and get the results rushed through." Dr. Martinez's tone was reassuring, but urgent. "I know this is frightening, but remember that we're just gathering information right now. Many things can cause these symptoms." The blood draw was quick, but William found himself studying Kate's arm as the vials filled with dark red blood, wondering what secrets that blood might reveal when examined under a microscope. Kate squeezed his hand during the procedure, and he realized he was the one who needed comforting, not her. Dr. Martinez walked them to the scheduling desk personally, something William had never seen her do before. She spoke quietly with the receptionist, emphasizing the urgency of getting Kate seen by the oncologist. Within minutes, they had an appointment scheduled for the following afternoon with Dr. Harrison. As they walked back to the car, William felt as though he was moving through a dream. Everything looked the same as it had an hour ago. The same parking lot, the same trees lining the street, the same blue sky overhead, but everything had changed. The word oncologist kept echoing in his mind, and he found himself stealing glances at Kate, trying to memorize her face exactly as it was in this moment. "Will, you're scaring me more than the doctor did," Kate said as they reached the car. "I need you to breathe." He realized he had been holding his breath and let it out in a long, shaky exhale. "I'm sorry. I'm just terrified." "I know. Me too." Kate leaned against the car door, looking exhausted by the short walk from the building. "But we don't know anything yet. Dr. Martinez could be wrong. This could be something completely treatable." William nodded, trying to convince himself as much as her. "You're right. We just need to take this one step at a time." That evening, William found himself unable to concentrate on anything. He tried to read, tried to watch television, tried to work on a project he had been putting off, but his mind kept circling back to the appointment with Dr. Harrison the next day. Kate had gone to bed early, claiming exhaustion, but William could hear her tossing and turning in their bedroom. He stood at the kitchen sink, washing the same plate for the third time, when he heard Kate call his name. He found her sitting on the edge of their bed, her nightgown twisted around her thin frame, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so scared, Will," she whispered. William sat beside her and pulled her into his arms, feeling how fragile she had become. "I know, sweetheart. I'm scared too." They held each other in the darkness, and William found himself making silent bargains with a God he wasn't sure he believed in. He would give anything, do anything, sacrifice anything if Kate could just be okay. The woman in his arms had been his best friend, his lover, his partner in every adventure for 15 years. She was supposed to grow old with him, supposed to be there when they finally had children, supposed to dance with him at their daughter's wedding someday. "Remember our first date?" Kate whispered against his chest. William smiled despite his fear. "You wore that green dress, and you were so nervous you spilled wine all over yourself. And instead of being embarrassed, you took off your tie and dabbed it up, and then you wore the tie with the wine stain for the rest of the evening because you said it was a badge of honor." "Best wine stain I ever wore," William said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I knew that night I was going to marry you, even with wine all over me, especially with wine all over you. It showed me you were real, not some perfect fantasy. Just a beautiful, clumsy, wonderful woman who I wanted to spend every day getting to know better." They talked through most of the night, sharing memories and fears in equal measure. William told Kate about all the things he loved about her, the way she hummed while cooking, how she always remembered the anniversaries of small, happy moments, the way she could find something beautiful in the most ordinary day. Kate told William how safe he had always made her feel, how his steady presence had given her the courage to take risks and try new things. As dawn began to lighten the sky, they both finally fell into an exhausted sleep, still wrapped in each other's arms. William's last conscious thought was a prayer that whatever the next day brought, they would face it together. The morning of the appointment with Dr. Harrison arrived gray and drizzly, matching William's mood perfectly. Kate seemed to have found some reserves of strength overnight, moving with more energy than she had shown in days as she got ready. She even put on makeup, something she hadn't bothered with in weeks. "I want to look like myself when I meet her," Kate explained when she caught William watching her in the bathroom mirror. William understood. Meeting an oncologist felt like crossing a threshold into a new and frightening world, and Kate wanted to enter it looking like the person she had always been, not like someone who was already sick. The drive to City General Hospital was longer than the trip to Dr. Martinez's office, and William found himself taking the scenic route without really meaning to. Some part of him hoped that if they just kept driving, if they never actually arrived at the appointment, then whatever Dr. Harrison might tell them could never become real. "Will," Kate said softly as they sat at a red light, "whatever she tells us today, I need you to know that these have been the best 15 years of my life. If something is seriously wrong, I don't want you to think we've been cheated. We've had more happiness than most people get in a lifetime." William's eyes filled with tears, but he managed to keep his voice steady. "Don't talk like that. We're going to have 50 more years together, and I'm going to remind you of this conversation when we're sitting on our porch at 90, complaining about our grandchildren making too much noise." Kate smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes that broke William's heart. "Promise me that if something happens to me, you won't stop living. Promise me you'll find a way to be happy again." "Nothing is going to happen to you," William said firmly, though his voice cracked on the words. "And I'm not making any promises about life without you, because that's not a life I'm ever going to have to live." The light turned green, and William drove the rest of the way to the hospital in determined silence, pushing away the dark thoughts that Kate's words had stirred up. He parked in the visitor's garage, and they walked hand in hand through the automatic doors into the main lobby. City General Hospital was a maze of corridors and elevator banks, but the signage was clear, and they found their way to Dr. Harrison's office on the 4th floor without too much difficulty. The oncology wing was quieter than the rest of the hospital, with softer lighting and more comfortable furniture. William supposed it was designed to be less clinical, more comforting for people facing the kinds of conversations that happened here. They checked in with the receptionist, a young man with kind eyes who seemed to understand without being told that this was their first visit to an oncologist. He spoke gently, explaining that Dr. Harrison was running a few minutes behind, but would see them shortly. He directed them to a seating area where several other couples sat in various stages of waiting, some holding hands tightly like William and Kate, others sitting in the exhausted silence of people who had been fighting this battle for a long time. William found himself studying these other couples, wondering what their stories were, how long they had been coming here, whether the tired-looking woman in the corner had good news or bad news at her last appointment. He realized he was trying to read their faces for clues about what the future might hold, as if their experiences could somehow predict his own. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson? A nurse appeared beside them, clipboard in hand. Dr. Harrison will see you now. As they stood up, William felt Kate's hand tighten in his. This was it. In a few minutes, they would know what they were facing. He squeezed her hand back, and together they followed the nurse down a hallway lined with examination rooms toward whatever their future held. Dr. Harrison's office was different from what William had expected. Instead of the sterile examination room he had imagined, they were led into a comfortable consultation room with a large wooden desk, family photos, and 2 leather chairs facing each other across a coffee table. Dr. Harrison herself was younger than William had anticipated, probably in her early 40s, with short brown hair and glasses that gave her a thoughtful appearance. She stood up when they entered, extending her hand with a warm but serious smile. "Please, have a seat," she said, gesturing to the leather chairs. "I've been reviewing Kate's blood work and the notes for Dr. Martinez. I want to start by saying that I understand how frightening this must be for both of you." William felt Kate's hand slip into his as they settled into the chairs. The doctor's kind manner helped ease some of his anxiety, but the careful way she chose her words made his stomach tighten with apprehension. Dr. Martinez mentioned that Kate has been experiencing fatigue, headaches, and weakness over the past several weeks. Dr. Harrison continued, opening a file on her desk. "Kate, can you tell me more about when these symptoms first started? Try to be as specific as possible." Kate took a deep breath before speaking. "I think it began about 6 weeks ago. At first, I just thought I was working too hard. I'm a teacher, and it was right before spring break, so I figured I was just worn out from dealing with 25 fourth graders all day." She managed a small smile. "But then during spring break, when I should have been recovering, I felt worse instead of better." "Tell me about the headaches," Dr. Harrison said, making notes as Kate spoke. "They're different from any headaches I've had before. They usually start in the morning and get worse throughout the day. Sometimes they're so bad that light bothers me, and I have to lie down in a dark room." Kate paused, thinking, "And lately, sometimes I feel nauseous with them." William watched Dr. Harrison's face as Kate described her symptoms, trying to read her expression for clues. The doctor listened carefully, occasionally asking follow-up questions, but her professional demeanor gave nothing away. "I've looked at your blood work," Dr. Harrison said finally, setting down her pen and leaning forward slightly. "There are some abnormalities that concern me. Your white blood cell count is elevated, and there are some other markers that suggest we need to do more testing to understand what's going on." "What kind of testing?" William asked, his voice coming out hoarser than he had intended. "I want to do a bone marrow biopsy and some additional blood tests. I also want to schedule an MRI to get a better look at what might be causing the headaches." Dr. Harrison's tone remained calm and reassuring, but William could sense the underlying urgency. "These tests will help us determine exactly what we're dealing with and how best to treat it." The word treat hung in the air between them. Treatment meant there was definitely something wrong, something serious enough to require medical intervention. William felt his world tilting slightly, as if the floor beneath his chair had become unsteady. "When can we do these tests?" Kate asked, her voice remarkably steady. "I can have you scheduled for the bone marrow biopsy tomorrow morning, and we can do the additional blood work at the same time. The MRI will probably be later in the week, but I'll have my staff coordinate everything and call you at the exact times." Dr. Harrison pulled out a pamphlet from her desk drawer and handed it to them. This explains what to expect with a bone marrow biopsy. It's not the most comfortable procedure, but it's over quickly, and the information it gives us is invaluable. William took the pamphlet, but the words seemed to swim on the page as he tried to read them. Bone marrow biopsy, MRI, treatment. The medical terminology felt foreign and frightening, like a language he wasn't equipped to understand. "Doctor," Kate said quietly, "I need to ask the question that's been keeping me awake at night. Do you think this could be leukemia?" Dr. Harrison was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Your symptoms and blood work are consistent with several possibilities, and leukemia is one of them. But until we have the results from the bone marrow biopsy, I can't give you a definitive diagnosis. What I can tell you is that even if it is leukemia, we have many treatment options available now that weren't available even 10 years ago." William felt the room start to spin around him. Leukemia. The word echoed in his mind like a death sentence, even though Dr. Harrison had just said there were treatment options. He thought of Kate's vibrant energy, her infectious laugh, the way she danced around the kitchen when her favorite song came on the radio. How could someone so full of life be seriously sick? "Are you okay, Mr. Thompson?" Dr. Harrison's voice seemed to come from very far away. William realized he had been holding his breath again and forced himself to exhale slowly. "Yes, sorry. This is just a lot to process. I understand completely. This is overwhelming information, and it's normal to feel scared and confused right now." Dr. Harrison handed William a glass of water from the pitcher on her desk. "Do you have any other questions for me today?" Kate squeezed William's hand. "What happens after we get the test results? Once I have all the information from the tests, we'll meet again to go over the results and discuss the next steps. If it is leukemia, we'll talk about treatment options, what to expect, and how to move forward. I want you to know that you won't be going through this alone. We have an excellent team here, including nurses, social workers, and other specialists who will be part of your care." The consultation continued for another 20 minutes, with Dr. Harrison explaining the various tests and what they might reveal. She gave them several pamphlets with information about leukemia and other blood cancers, as well as contact information for patient support services. By the time they left her office, William's head was spinning with medical terms and procedures he had never heard of before. The walk back to the car was silent. Kate moved slowly, and William could see that the appointment had drained what little energy she had. As they drove home, William found himself taking mental photographs of everything. The way Kate's hair caught the afternoon light coming through the car window, the sound of her breathing, the familiar weight of her hand in his when they stopped at traffic lights. "Talk to me, Will," Kate said as they pulled into their driveway. "I can practically hear you thinking." William turned off the engine and sat quietly for a moment, trying to organize his thoughts. "I keep thinking about all the things we plan to do. The trip to Italy we've been saving for. Remodeling the guest bathroom. Having kids." His voice broke slightly on the last words. Kate turned her seat to face him fully. "We can still do those things. We don't even know for sure what we're dealing with yet. And even if it is leukemia, Dr. Harrison said there are treatments. But what if?" William started, then stopped himself. He didn't want to voice his deepest fears out loud, as if speaking them might make them more likely to come true. "What if I die?" Kate finished gently. "Will, I need you to listen to me. We can't live in the what-ifs. We have to live in the right now, in the today. Today, I'm here with you. Today, we're going to go inside and make dinner together and watch terrible reality TV and argue about what movie to watch before bed. That's what we have, and that's what we need to focus on." William nodded, though tears were rolling down his cheeks. "I just love you so much, Kate. I can't imagine my life without you." "Then don't imagine it. Help me live this life, whatever time we have, whether it's 50 years or 50 days. Help me make it count." They went inside and tried to follow Kate's plan for a normal evening, but everything felt different now. William found himself watching Kate more intently, noticing the way she moved carefully as if her body might betray her, the way she pushed food around on her plate without really eating it. When she laughed at something silly on television, he memorized the sound, storing it away like a precious recording he might need to play back someday. That night, they lay in bed talking about practical things they had never discussed before. Kate wanted to make sure William knew where all their important documents were kept, how to pay the bills, which insurance policies they had. It was the kind of conversation that married couples often put off indefinitely, assuming they would have plenty of time later to sort out the details. "We should probably call our families," Kate said, staring up at the ceiling in the darkness. William's stomach clenched at the thought. Kate's parents lived in Arizona, and his were in Oregon. They saw them a few times a year and talked regularly on the phone, but they had been waiting to have more information before sharing the news about Kate's health problems. "What do we tell them?" William asked. "The truth. That I've been sick, that we're doing tests, and that we'll know more soon." Kate turned on her side to face him. "But I don't want them to panic and fly out here until we know what we're dealing with. Your mom would be on the next plane, and my dad would probably drive straight through from Phoenix." William smiled despite his worry. Kate was right about their parents. Both sets were loving, but tended toward dramatic reactions in crisis situations. "Maybe we should wait until after the bone marrow biopsy results. Give them facts instead of fears." "That's what I was thinking, too." They called in sick to work the next morning. Kate had already arranged for a substitute teacher to cover her classes for the rest of the week, and William's architectural firm was understanding about the family medical emergency. The bone marrow biopsy was scheduled for 10 in the morning, which gave them time for a quiet breakfast together. Kate had read the pamphlet Dr. Harrison gave them and understood that the procedure would be uncomfortable, but she seemed determined to approach it with her characteristic blend of humor and bravery. "At least I'll have something interesting to tell my students when I go back to work," she said, trying to keep the mood light. How many fourth-grade teachers can say they've had a needle stuck into their hip bone? William marveled at her ability to find lightness even in such a dark situation. It was one of the things he had always loved about Kate, her refusal to let life's difficulties completely steal her joy. Even now, facing the possibility of a life-threatening illness, she was trying to find ways to maintain hope and humor. The bone marrow biopsy took place in the hospital's outpatient clinic. William was allowed to stay with Kate during the procedure, holding her hand while the doctor inserted a long needle into her hip bone to extract a sample of bone marrow. Kate gritted her teeth during the worst part, but didn't cry out, squeezing William's hand so tightly he thought she might break his fingers. "That wasn't too bad," she said afterward, though William could see she was shaky and pale from the experience. "When will we get the results?" "Dr. Harrison should have them by Friday," the technician said, helping Kate off the examination table. "She'll call you to schedule a follow-up appointment once she's reviewed everything." Friday was 3 days away. 3 days of waiting and wondering and trying not to think about the possibilities. William had never realized how slowly time could move when you were waiting for news that might change your entire life. They went home and spent the rest of the day quietly. Kate was sore from the biopsy and spent most of the afternoon resting on the couch, while William worked from his laptop nearby. He found it impossible to concentrate on his current project, a design for a new office building, when his wife might be fighting for her life. The blueprints and structural calculations that usually absorbed his attention completely felt trivial and meaningless. Thursday passed in much the same way. Kate's energy seemed to be declining again, and she slept more than usual. William found himself checking on her frequently, sometimes just standing in the doorway, watching her sleep, reassuring himself that she was still breathing normally. He started making lists in his head of all the things he wanted to say to her, all the memories he wanted to make sure they talked about, all the ways he wanted to show her how much he loved her. On Friday morning, William woke up before his alarm and lay in bed listening to Kate's gentle breathing beside him. Today, they would get answers. Today, their life would officially change direction, one way or another. He thought about the conversation he had with Kate's principal earlier in the week, when he had called to explain that Kate would need extended time off for medical reasons. The principal, Mrs. Rodriguez had been incredibly understanding and supportive, but hearing himself say the words medical reasons out loud had made everything feel more real and more frightening. Kate stirred beside him, opening her eyes slowly. "Is it Friday already?" "It's Friday," William confirmed, leaning over to kiss her forehead. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous. Ready to know." She sat up carefully, still tender from the bone marrow biopsy. "Whatever Dr. Harrison tells us today, we're going to handle it together, right?" "Together," William agreed, though his heart was already racing with anxiety about the phone call they were expecting sometime that afternoon. They spent the morning trying to distract themselves with normal activities. William attempted to work on his laptop, while Kate graded papers from the substitute folder her principal had brought by earlier in the week. But both of them kept glancing at the phone, willing it to ring and simultaneously dreading what they might hear. The call came at 2:30 in the afternoon. William was in the kitchen making sandwiches for lunch when he heard Kate answer the phone in the living room. Her voice was calm and professional as she confirmed her identity and availability to talk. Then there was a long silence, and William found himself frozen in place, a knife full of peanut butter suspended halfway between the jar and the bread. "I see," Kate said finally, her voice smaller than before. "Yes, we could be there at 4:30. "Thank you, Dr. Harrison." William heard the phone click off, followed by complete silence. He set down the knife and walked slowly into the living room, where he found Kate sitting on the edge of the couch, staring at the phone in her hands. "She wants us to come in this afternoon to discuss the results," Kate said without looking up. She wouldn't tell me anything specific over the phone, but her voice. Kate finally raised her eyes to meet William's. "It wasn't good news, Will." I could hear it in her voice. William sat down beside Kate and pulled her into his arms, feeling her begin to shake against him. After 3 days of trying to stay strong and positive, the reality of the situation was finally hitting them both. Whatever Dr. Harrison had to tell them, it was serious enough that she didn't want to discuss it over the phone. "We don't know anything for certain yet," William said, but his words sounded hollow even to himself. They spent the next 2 hours in a strange state of suspended animation, going through the motions of eating lunch and getting ready to leave for the hospital while their minds raced with possibilities and fears. Kate changed clothes 3 times, as if finding the right outfit might somehow change the news they were about to receive. William found himself checking and rechecking that they had everything they might need: insurance cards, the list of questions Kate had written down earlier in the week, tissues, water bottles. As they drove back to the hospital for what felt like the 100th time in a week, William reached over and took Kate's hand. Her fingers were cold and trembling, and he rubbed them gently with his thumb, trying to warm them. "I love you," he said, the words feeling both insufficient and essential. "I love you too," Kate replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They sat in Dr. Harrison's waiting room for only a few minutes before being called back, but those minutes stretched endlessly. William watched the other patients and families around them, wondering if they were waiting for results too, or if they were here for regular treatment appointments. He tried to imagine Kate in that second category, someone who came to the oncology clinic regularly for treatment, someone who was fighting cancer but still living her life. When Dr. Harrison's nurse called their names, William's heart began pounding so hard he was sure everyone in the waiting room could hear it. This was it. In a few minutes, they would know exactly what they were facing. As they followed the nurse down the familiar hallway, William sent up a silent prayer to whatever forces in the universe might be listening. "Please let us be able to handle whatever comes next." Dr. Harrison was waiting for them in her office, the same comfortable room where they had met earlier in the week. But this time there was a box of tissues prominently placed on the coffee table between the chairs, and another doctor was present, a tall man with graying hair who introduced himself as Dr. Chun, the head of the hematology department. William's stomach dropped at the sight of the second doctor. Good news didn't usually require additional specialists to deliver it. "Please sit down," Dr. Harrison said gently, her voice carrying the same careful tone William had heard from doctors in movies when they were about to deliver devastating news. Kate and William settled into the same leather chairs they had occupied 3 days earlier, but everything felt different now. The comfortable room suddenly seemed too small, too warm. William could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Dr. Harrison opened the file on her desk and took a deep breath. "I've received the results of Kate's bone marrow biopsy and the additional blood work we ordered. I'm afraid the news isn't what we were hoping for." The room seemed to tilt around William. Those words, "the news isn't what we were hoping for," felt like a physical blow. He reached for Kate's hand and found it ice cold. "Kate, you have acute lymphoblastic leukemia, also called ALL," Dr. Harrison continued, her voice gentle but clear. "It's a type of blood cancer that affects the white blood cells. The cancer cells are multiplying quickly, which explains the symptoms you've been experiencing." William heard the words, but they seemed to come from very far away, as if Dr. Harrison was speaking through water. Leukemia. Cancer. His Kate had cancer. The woman who had never been seriously sick a day in her life, who jogged 3 miles every morning and ate organic vegetables and laughed until she cried at silly movies, had cancer. "I don't understand," Kate said, her voice steady but small. "I've always been so healthy. I exercise, I eat well, I don't smoke. How can I have cancer?" Dr. Chun leaned forward in his chair. "Acute lymphoblastic leukemia isn't caused by lifestyle factors. It's not something you did or didn't do. Sometimes these cancers just happen, and we don't always know why. What's important now is that we've caught it, and we can begin treatment immediately." "Treatment," William managed to say, his voice coming out as barely more than a whisper. "What does treatment mean? What are we looking at?" Dr. Harrison pulled out several pamphlets and placed them on the coffee table. "Treatment for ALL typically involves chemotherapy in several phases. We start with what we call induction therapy, which is designed to eliminate the cancer cells and put the disease into remission. This usually takes about a month and requires hospitalization." "Hospitalization?" Kate asked. "For a whole month?" "Most of the time, yes. The chemotherapy drugs are very strong, and you'll need careful monitoring for side effects and complications. Your immune system will be severely compromised during treatment, so it's safest to be in the hospital where we can protect you from infections." William felt like he was drowning. A month in the hospital, strong chemotherapy drugs, compromised immune system. These weren't words he had ever imagined applying to his life, to Kate's life. Just a week ago, their biggest concern had been whether to repaint the guest bedroom or replace the carpet first. "After the induction phase, what happens then?" Kate asked, and William marveled at her ability to ask practical questions when he could barely form coherent thoughts. "If the induction therapy is successful, and we have good reason to hope it will be, then we move to consolidation therapy and maintenance therapy. The entire treatment process typically takes about 2 to 3 years," Dr. Chin explained. 2 to 3 years. The number hit William like a sledgehammer. 2 to 3 years of treatment, of hospitals, of watching Kate fight for her life. 2 to 3 years of their lives completely upended, their plans and dreams put on hold while they battled an invisible enemy that had invaded Kate's blood. "What are the odds?" William asked, surprising himself by speaking. "What are Kate's chances?" Dr. Harrison and Dr. Chun exchanged a glance before Dr. Harrison answered. "With current treatment protocols, the 5-year survival rate for adults with ALL is about 60 to 70%. Kate's age and overall health before this diagnosis work in her favor. She's young, she's been in excellent physical condition, and we've caught the disease relatively early. 60 to 70%. William tried to process what that meant. It wasn't good odds, but it wasn't hopeless either. Kate had a better than even chance of surviving this, of beating it completely. But that also meant there was a 30 to 40% chance that she wouldn't. That she could die despite all the treatments and medical intervention. "When do we start?" Kate asked, her voice stronger now, as if having concrete information and a plan of action was helping her process the shock. I'd like to admit you to the hospital on Monday and begin the induction chemotherapy on Tuesday, Dr. Harrison said. That give you the weekend to get your affairs in order and prepare for the hospitalization. Get your affairs in order. The phrase sounded so formal, so final. William thought about all the things they would need to arrange. Kate's classroom, her students who wouldn't understand why their teacher suddenly disappeared in the middle of the school year, bills that would need to be paid, family members who would need to be notified. Can I ask you something? Kate said, looking directly at Dr. Harrison. Please be honest with me. How sick am I right now? Am I going to make it through the weekend? Dr. Harrison's expression softened. Kate, you're very sick, and the leukemia is progressing quickly. But you're not in immediate danger this weekend. The induction chemotherapy will start working within days of beginning treatment. You have time to prepare, to spend with your family, to process this news. As they left the hospital that afternoon, William felt as though he was moving through a dream. Everything looked exactly the same as it had when they arrived. The same parking garage, the same afternoon sunshine, the same trees lining the hospital grounds. But their entire world had changed in the space of a 30-minute conversation. The drive home was silent except for the soft sound of Kate crying. William wanted to comfort her, but he didn't know what to say. Everything that came to mind sounded like empty platitudes. It'll be okay, we'll get through this, you're strong, and none of it felt true or helpful in the face of what they had just learned. When they got home, Kate went straight to their bedroom and closed the door. William stood in the kitchen, staring at the lunch dishes he had left in the sink that morning, when getting test results was still in the future, and cancer was something that happened to other people. He could hear Kate making phone calls from the bedroom, probably calling in sick for Monday and Tuesday, arranging for extended substitute coverage. William pulled out his own phone and stared at it for a long time before finally dialing his parents' number in Oregon. His mother answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful and welcoming as always. William, what a nice surprise. How are you and Kate doing? William's throat closed up completely. How could he possibly explain what they had learned today? How could he tell his mother that Kate, whom she loved like a daughter, had cancer? Mom, he managed to say, and apparently something in his voice communicated everything he couldn't say out loud. What's wrong? Her voice immediately shifted to the concerned, protective tone he remembered from childhood injuries and disappointments. It's Kate. She's sick, Mom. Really sick. And then the dam broke, and William found himself crying harder than he had since he was a child, telling his mother about the past week, about the tests and the diagnosis and the treatment that would start on Monday. His mother listened without interrupting, making soft sounds of sympathy and shock at the appropriate moments. When William finished explaining, she was quiet for a moment before speaking. We're coming out there, she said firmly. Your father and I will be on a plane tomorrow. Mom, you don't have to. William Thompson, don't you dare try to talk us out of this. Kate is family, and family shows up. We'll stay in a hotel if you need space, but we're going to be there. William felt a wave of relief wash over him. The thought of facing the next few weeks alone with Kate had been overwhelming, but having his parents there would help. His mother was a retired nurse, and his father was the kind of calm, steady presence that made everything feel more manageable. After he hung up with his parents, William called Kate's parents in Arizona. That conversation was even more difficult because Kate's father had been battling his own health issues, and William wasn't sure how the stress of Kate's diagnosis would affect him. But, like his own parents, Kate's immediate response was to want to come to California to help. By the time Kate emerged from the bedroom, both sets of parents were making travel arrangements. She looked exhausted and pale, but there was a kind of determined set to her shoulders that William recognized. It was the same expression she wore when she was grading a particularly challenging set of tests or trying to help a struggling student. Kate in problem-solving mode, ready to tackle whatever needed to be done. I called the school and talked to Mrs. Rodriguez, Kate said, settling onto the couch beside William. She's going to arrange for long-term substitute coverage and handle everything with the district's insurance. I also called my classroom assistant and asked her to put together some materials for the kids to help them understand while I'll be gone. William was amazed by her practicality, her ability to think about her students even while processing her own diagnosis. What did you tell her to say to the kids? The truth, but in fourth grade terms. That Mrs. Thompson is sick and will be in the hospital for a while getting medicine to help her feel better. That it's not their fault and it's not contagious, and that she hopes to be back to teaching before the end of the school year. The end of the school year was 3 months away. William tried to imagine Kate back in her classroom by then, teaching multiplication tables and helping kids with their science fair projects, but it felt impossible to picture that far into the future. They spent that evening making lists and phone calls. Kate wanted to make sure all their bills were set up for automatic payment, that William had all the passwords and account information he might need, that their wills were up to date. It was the kind of preparation people usually did when going on a long vacation, except they were preparing for Kate to spend a month in the hospital fighting for her life. I want to write some letters, Kate said as they were getting ready for bed. To our parents, to my students, to you. Just in case. Just in case what? William asked, though he knew exactly what she meant. Just in case the treatment doesn't work. Just in case I don't make it through this. Kate's voice was matter of fact, but William could see the fear in her eyes. I know you don't want to think about it, but I need to do this. I need to know that I've said everything I want to say to the people I love. William nodded, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. He understood her need to prepare for every possibility, even the ones that were too terrible to think about. It was typical Kate, facing the worst-case scenario head-on so she could focus on fighting for the best-case scenario. That night, they lay in bed talking about all the practical details they needed to handle over the weekend. William would need to arrange time off work, probably several weeks at minimum. They needed to deep clean the house before Kate was admitted to the hospital, since she would be vulnerable to infections when she came home. Kate wanted a meal prep and freeze dinners for William, even though he protested that he was perfectly capable of feeding himself. I know you can feed yourself, Kate said, curled up against his chest. But I want to take care of you in whatever ways I can, while I can. Let me do this. Saturday morning, both sets of parents arrived within hours of each other. William's parents took a taxi from the airport and appeared at the door with suitcases and a grocery bag full of Kate's favorite food from the specialty market near their home in Oregon. Kate's parents rented a car in Phoenix and drove straight through the night, arriving tired but determined to help in whatever way they could. Having the house full of family was both comforting and overwhelming. Kate's mother immediately took over the kitchen, cooking and cleaning with the nervous energy of someone who needed to stay busy. William's mother sat with Kate, asking general questions about the diagnosis and treatment plan with the professional interest of someone who had spent 30 years as a nurse. The fathers handled logistics, researching the hospital, finding information about parking, and visiting hours, calling their insurance companies to understand what would be covered. By Saturday evening, William felt like they had transformed from a couple dealing with a private crisis into a family unit mobilized for battle. The house was spotless. The freezer was full of pre-made meals, and everyone had their assigned roles for the next phase of Kate's treatment. Sunday was quieter. Kate spent most of the day writing the letters she had mentioned, sitting in the garden with a notebook, occasionally asking William questions about specific memories or inside jokes she wanted to include. William tried to give her privacy, but he found himself watching her through the kitchen window as she wrote, memorizing the sight of her in her favorite sundress, her red hair catching the afternoon light. That evening, they had what Kate insisted on calling their last supper, a family dinner with all of Kate's favorite foods, and everyone trying to maintain normal conversation while the weight of Monday's hospital admission hung over everything. Kate's father told funny stories about his latest golf misadventures. William's mother shared updates about their neighbors back in Oregon. Everyone was working hard to keep the mood light, to give Kate one more normal evening before everything changed. After dinner, Kate asked for some time alone with each family member. William watched from the kitchen as she walked in the garden with his mother, their heads close together in intimate conversation. She sat on the front porch with his father, holding his hand while he spoke quietly about something that made them both smile. With her own parents, she spent nearly an hour in the living room, the three of them holding each other and crying together in a way that made William's heart break. Finally, it was just Kate and William sitting on their bed in the quiet house while their parents watched television downstairs. Kate had placed the letters she had written in a small wooden box on her dresser, each envelope carefully labeled. "I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow," Kate said, her voice steady but serious. "I don't know how sick the chemotherapy is going to make me, or how long I'll be in the hospital, or whether the treatment will work. But I know that right now, in this moment, I'm so grateful for the life we've built together." William pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, feeling the warmth of her body against his. Tomorrow she would be a cancer patient, hooked up to machines, and fighting for her life. But tonight, she was still just Kate, still his wife, still the woman he had fallen in love with 15 years ago. "I'm going to fight this with everything I have," Kate whispered against his chest. "But I need you to promise me that if something happens to me, you'll remember this, how much I love you, how happy you've made me, how grateful I am for every day we've had." William held her tighter, wishing he could protect her from what was coming, wishing love alone was enough to cure cancer. "I promise," he said, though his voice shook with the words. "But you're going to be okay. You're going to beat this, and we're going to grow old together just like we planned." Kate smiled, but there were tears streaming down her face. "I hope so, Will. I really, really hope so." They fell asleep, holding each other, their hands intertwined, storing up the comfort of human touch before the sterile world of the hospital took over. William's last conscious thought was a prayer that when they came home from the hospital, whenever that might be, Kate would still be Kate, still be his partner, still be alive to argue about what movie to watch and dance in the kitchen and fill their house with laughter. Monday morning arrived gray and rainy, as if the weather was reflecting their mood. Kate packed her suitcase with comfortable pajamas, books she probably wouldn't feel well enough to read, and the small teddy bear William had given her on their first Valentine's Day together. She moved with careful deliberation, as if the simple act of packing for the hospital was a ritual that needed to be performed correctly. As they drove to the hospital for Kate's admission, William found himself taking mental snapshots again. The way Kate looked out the passenger window, watching the familiar neighborhoods go by, the sound of her humming nervously under her breath, the feeling of her hand in his at the red lights. Whatever happened in the next month, whatever the chemotherapy did to her, he wanted to remember exactly how she looked and sounded on this morning before the battle began. The oncology ward at City General Hospital looked nothing like the comfortable consultation rooms where they had met with Dr. Harrison. This was a world of beeping machines, antiseptic smells, and nurses moving with practiced efficiency through halls lined with patient rooms. William carried Kate's suitcase while she walked slowly beside him, her hand gripping his arm for support. Kate's room was on the 4th floor, overlooking the hospital's small garden. The room itself was larger than William had expected, with space for a reclining chair beside the hospital bed where family members could sleep overnight. There was a small television mounted on the wall and a window that actually opened, letting in fresh air along with the sounds of the city below. "This isn't so bad," Kate said, trying to sound positive as she looked around the space that would be her home for the next month. But William could see the fear in her eyes as she watched the nursing staff set up the 4-pole and organize the various machines that would soon be connected to her body. The admission process took several hours. Kate was assigned to Dr. Patricia Reeves, one of the oncologists who specialized in treating all patients. Dr. Reeves was younger than Dr. Harrison, probably in her early 30s, with an energetic manner that somehow managed to be both professional and reassuring. She explained each step of the treatment process as she examined Kate, from the central line that would be surgically inserted the next morning to the specific chemotherapy drugs that would be used. "The first few days are usually the hardest," Dr. Reeves explained as she reviewed Kate's chart. "Your body needs time to adjust to the medications, and you'll probably experience nausea, fatigue, and some other side effects. But We have excellent supportive care here, medications to help with the nausea, nutritionists to help maintain your strength, and a whole team dedicated to making this as manageable as possible. William listened carefully, taking notes on a pad of paper and asking questions about side effects and timelines. Kate seemed to have retreated somewhere inside herself, answering the medical questions when asked, but otherwise staying quiet. He recognized this as her way of coping with overwhelming situations, pulling inward to conserve energy for what lay ahead. By late afternoon, Kate was settled into her room and connected to her first 4-bag fluids and pre-medications to prepare her body for the chemotherapy that would begin the following day. William sat in the reclining chair beside her bed, holding her hand while she dozed fitfully. The constant noise of the hospital ward call bells, intercom announcements, conversations in the hallway made real rest impossible. Both sets of parents had been in and out throughout the day, bringing flowers and magazines and trying to make the sterile room feel more like home. But visiting hours were limited, and by 8 o'clock, William found himself alone with Kate in the quiet of the evening shift. "Talk to me about something normal," Kate said suddenly, her eyes still closed, but her hand squeezing his. "Tell me about your week at work, or what you want to plant in the garden this spring, or anything that isn't about cancer." William smiled, understanding her need to escape into normalcy for a few minutes. "Well, I've been thinking about that raised bed we talked about building behind the garage. I think we should grow tomatoes and peppers, maybe some herbs you can use for cooking." "What kind of tomatoes?" Kate asked, opening her eyes and looking at him with genuine interest. "I was thinking about those heirloom varieties we saw at the farmer's market last summer. The purple ones and the ones that look like they're striped. You said they were the best tomatoes you'd ever tasted." They talked about gardening plans for nearly an hour, discussing soil amendments and plant spacing as if Kate would definitely be home in time for spring planting. It was a small act of faith, this conversation about future tomatoes, but it felt important to both of them. They were claiming the right to make plans, to assume there would be a future beyond the hospital room. Tuesday morning brought the surgical insertion of Kate's central line, a procedure that would allow the chemotherapy drugs to be delivered directly into her bloodstream without the need for multiple force sticks. William waited in the family lounge during the surgery, pacing restlessly while their parents tried to keep him distracted with conversation and cups of coffee that tasted like cardboard. When Kate was brought back to her room, she was groggy from the anesthesia, but awake enough to squeeze William's hand. "How do I look?" she asked, her voice thick from the medications. William looked at his wife, now with tubes and wires connecting her to various machines, and tried to see past the medical equipment to the woman he loved. "Beautiful," he said, and meant it completely. "You look like someone who's ready to fight." The chemotherapy began that afternoon. Dr. Reeves explained each drug as it was added to Kate's 4-line. Vincristine, daunorubicin, cyclophosphamide, names that sounded more like science fiction than medicine. Kate watched the clear liquid drip slowly into her central line, her face composed, but her free hand gripping William's tightly. "This is it," she said quietly. "We're really doing this." The first few days of treatment were everything Dr. Reeves had warned them about, and worse. Kate developed severe nausea that left her unable to keep down even small sips of water. Her appetite disappeared completely, and she grew weaker by the hour as the powerful drugs coursed through her system. William watched helplessly as his vibrant, energetic wife was reduced to a pale, exhausted patient who slept fitfully between bouts of sickness. The nursing staff was incredible, adjusting medications and providing comfort measures around the clock. William learned the names of all the nurses on Kate's floor: Maria, who always had a joke to share; James, who was studying to become a nurse practitioner; Sarah, who had a gentle touch with the 4 lines and seemed to anticipate Kate's needs before she could voice them. William slept in the reclining chair beside Kate's bed every night, leaving only to shower at their parents' hotel or to grab meals in the hospital cafeteria. He learned to distinguish between the different alarms on Kate's machines, to recognize which beeping sounds required immediate attention and which were just routine monitoring. He became an expert at adjusting Kate's pillows for maximum comfort and learned to help her to the bathroom when she was too weak to walk on her own. By the end of the first week, Kate had lost 15 pounds and most of her hair had begun to fall out. William found red strands on her pillow every morning, and eventually Kate asked him to help her shave off what remained rather than continue losing it gradually. "I want to control this one thing," she said, sitting on the edge of her hospital bed, while William carefully ran the electric razor over her scalp. "If I'm going to be bald, I want to choose when it happens." When they finished, Kate looked at herself in the small mirror on her bedside table. Without her hair, her eyes looked enormous in her thin face, and the central line scar was visible on her chest above her hospital gown. She looked like a cancer patient now, completely and unmistakably. "I hardly recognize myself," she said, touching her smooth scalp with wonder. William sat beside her on the bed and took her hand. "You look like the bravest person I've ever known." The second week brought different challenges. Kate's white blood cell count dropped to dangerously low levels, putting her at risk for serious infections. She was placed in isolation, requiring all visitors to wear masks and gowns, and her world shrank even further to just her room and the few medical staff members who were authorized to care for her. William watched as Kate struggled not just with the physical effects of the chemotherapy, but with the psychological impact of being so isolated and dependent on others. The woman who had never liked asking for help now needed assistance with the most basic activities. She couldn't shower without help, couldn't walk to the bathroom without support, couldn't even open the containers of food that she was too nauseated to eat anyway. "I feel like I'm disappearing," Kate confided to William one evening, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Like the person I used to be is just gone." William climbed carefully into the hospital bed beside her, mindful of all the wires and tubes, and held her as gently as he could. "You're still here, Kate. You're still fighting, still making the nurses laugh with your terrible jokes, still worrying about your students, even though you can barely keep your eyes open. The treatment is hard, but you're still you." The third week brought a turning point. Kate's nausea began to subside, and she was able to eat small amounts of bland foods. Her energy level improved slightly, enough that she could sit in the chair by the window for a few hours each day and even take short walks in the hallway with William's help. Most importantly, her blood work showed that the chemotherapy was working. The cancer cells in her blood were decreasing dramatically. "This is exactly what we wanted to see, Dr. Reeves said, showing them the latest test results. "Kate's body is responding beautifully to the treatment. If this continues, we should be able to discharge her by the end of next week." For the first time since the diagnosis, William allowed himself to feel genuine hope. Kate was going to make it through the induction therapy. She was going to come home. They were going to have more time together, more chances to make memories, more opportunities to fight this disease and win. Kate seemed to draw strength from the positive test results as well. She started asking about her students again, wanting updates from the substitute teacher. She began planning what she wanted to eat when she got home, making lists of simple foods that might be gentle on her recovering digestive system. She even started talking about the garden again, wondering if it would be too late to plant tomatoes when she felt strong enough to spend time outdoors. The final week of Kate's hospitalization was both the longest and the shortest of William's life. Long because they were both eager to leave the hospital environment and return to their normal life. Short because he was terrified about taking care of Kate at home without the constant support of the medical staff. What if something goes wrong at home? William asked Dr. Reeves during one of their daily meetings. What if she gets a fever or the nausea comes back, or she falls and hurts herself? Dr. Reeves smiled with understanding. These are normal concerns, William, but Kate is stable enough for discharge, and we'll have a home health nurse checking on her twice a week. Plus, you have our 24-hour number if any emergencies arise. On Kate's last day in the hospital, the nursing staff organized a small celebration. They had ordered a cake from the hospital cafeteria, and decorated Kate's room with balloons and a banner that read "Congratulations on completing induction." Kate was still weak and tired easily, but she managed to stay awake for the whole party, laughing at the nurses' stories and posing for pictures with the staff who had become like family over the past month. "Thank you for taking such good care of me," Kate said, her voice emotional as she hugged each nurse goodbye. "I know this is your job, but you made it feel like you really cared about me as a person." "We did care," Maria said, tears in her eyes. "You're going to beat this thing, Kate. I just know it." The drive home felt surreal. After a month in the sterile environment of the hospital, everything outside seemed almost overwhelming in its normalcy. People walking their dogs, children playing in yards, neighbors washing their cars. All the ordinary activities of life continuing as if nothing had changed, while William and Kate had been fighting the battle of their lives just a few miles away. Their house looked exactly the same as they had left it 4 weeks earlier, but William felt like completely different people were returning to it. Kate moved slowly up the front steps, leaning heavily on William's arm, pausing to catch her breath before they reached the door. The woman who used to bound up these same steps 3 at a time now needed to rest halfway. Inside, the house smelled like the cleaning products their parents had used to sanitize everything before Kate's return. Fresh flowers sat on the kitchen counter, and the refrigerator was stocked with all the foods Dr. Reeves had recommended for Kate's recovery. Everything had been prepared to welcome them home, but William still felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility now that they were on their own. Kate settled onto the living room couch, wrapped in her favorite blanket, and looked around the familiar space with obvious relief. "I wasn't sure I was ever going to see this room again," she said quietly. William sat beside her, careful not to jostle her too much. "Well, you're here. You made it through the hardest part. This is just the beginning, though," Kate said, realistic as always about what lay ahead. 2 more years of treatment, months more of chemotherapy, all the uncertainty about whether the cancer will stay gone. William nodded, acknowledging the truth of what she said. The induction therapy had been successful in getting Kate into remission, but the next phases of treatment would be almost as challenging. There would be more hospitalizations, more side effects, more tests and scans, and worry about whether the cancer was truly gone. But sitting in their living room, with Kate home and alive beside him, William felt something he hadn't experienced in months: gratitude for the present moment. Kate was here. The treatment was working. They had today, and they had each other, and for now that was enough. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together," William said, echoing the promise they had made to each other on that first terrifying day in Dr. Harrison's office. Kate smiled, the first genuinely happy smile William had seen from her in weeks. "Together," she agreed. That night, they slept in their own bed for the first time in a month. William lay awake for a long time, listening to Kate's breathing beside him, marveling at the simple miracle of having her home. The future was still uncertain, still frightening in many ways. Kate's cancer could return, the treatment could fail, they could face years of struggle ahead. But tonight, Kate was alive and breathing beside him in their own bed, in their own house, surrounded by all the ordinary comforts of home. Tonight, they had won the first battle in what would likely be a long war. And for tonight, that was victory enough. As William finally drifted off to sleep, Kate's hand found his under the covers, their fingers intertwining in the darkness just as they had every night for 15 years. Some things, William realized, were stronger than cancer. Some things endured no matter what medical crises tried to destroy them. Love was one of those things. Hope was another. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new treatments, new fears to face. But tonight, William and Kate Thompson were home together, and that simple fact felt like the most profound miracle either of them had ever witnessed.